Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Esther Archange, and I am an academic trainer with the Center for Teaching and Learning. Today's session is entitled Emotional Resilience with NCU alumni, Dr. Jackie Hood Martin. Thank you for being here. She has a very long resume. Just a couple of housekeeping items before the presentation. I am recording the webinar and the video will be posted on the Center for Teaching and Learning's LibGuides webinar page within 24 hours. If you have questions throughout today's session, you can type them in the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the Zoom window. Be sure to use this feature to ask your questions to our presenter. In addition, the chat feature is open for dialogue and conversation. We welcome all questions, so please don't be shy. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jackie Hood Martin.
Good afternoon, Esther. How are you? Thank you for inviting me today. I'm so excited when I always get a chance to come and speak to our alumni of NCU. Each of you in your own right is doing amazing things and living very busy lives, seemingly now that the world has just opened up. So I'm excited today to come and share on emotional resilience. As Esther mentioned, I am an alumni of NCU. I have my master's degree in education, which in the area of education technology for higher ed, and a PhD in biblical studies. You know, being emotionally resilient isn't always easy, but somehow or another, we learn to muster up enough bravery, enough courage, enough oomph to kind of keep it going. And so during this pandemic, there has been no shortage of opportunities to say, I just want to kind of be a shrinking violet. But at the same time, there's something in our heart that gives that special little ability that we have to just kind of keep it moving and keep it going. So as we get started, I know you've already said where you're from in the chat. If you could just say, what are some of the challenges that you've been experiencing through this pandemic, whether it's personally, professionally, or academically? And hopefully, as I go through my presentation today, we'll hopefully be able to have covered some of those things, but also I will be taking questions so that I can answer them. Or if you have opportunity, you just want to place comments in the chat, you can do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we are going to get ourselves started with our webinar today. All righty. So mental health and emotional resilience for balanced living. I can tell you that as a balanced living coach, a part of my work and practice since I left higher ed, I found myself being in that space of saying, I want to do something that not only helps me, but helps other people. I am I guess I'll say fully retired now, since it's been over a decade, college dean and college vice president of academic and student affairs within the City Colleges of Chicago system, and working with people on an ongoing basis, consistently working with professors, all of the changes when it comes to accreditation. There's just a variety of things in the area of education, if you will, that play heavily on our mental well-being. We want the best for everyone, but we're not always in the space, the position, or the decision maker in order to be able to make that happen. So as you think about where you are in your walk, in your everyday life, take down some notes, check yourselves with your mental health, see how you're becoming emotionally resilient, and recognize that balanced living is literally just a state of being. It's not necessarily how much you can get done in the course of the day or how many things you have on your calendar, what your honey-do list may look like. It's literally, how do I feel about myself in this moment? Because balance is fleeting, and it happens throughout the course of the day, throughout the course of the week, throughout the course of the month, throughout the course of the year. So at any given time, we can find ourselves off center. But today, I'm hopeful that I will give you some tips and tools that will allow you to find your center, regain your balance, and be able to recover the life that you would like to live for yourself. As I move through our presentation today, one of the things that I want to talk about is the definition of resilience. You know, we try so hard to be all things to all people, but let me just tell you, sometimes you have to unloose that tie, take off that cape, and toss it to the side, because we're living in a time and space where who you are matters. The role that you play in everyday life makes a difference to the people who love you. So, one definition related to resilience is the capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation. Now, I know that may sound weird because you think about, oh my God, my body going through metamorphosis. Well, the reality is that certain levels of stress that we go through cause our bodies to do something internally. We may become inflamed, which leads to us being enraged. We can begin to get headaches and shoulder aches and back aches and cramps and have foggy brain. When you're out of balance and your resilience is tested on so many levels, it seems as if waves are crashing against us on every side. And, it's that space where we can say, do I have what it takes to recover from being battered on so many different sides and having so many things come at me? Now, the second definition related to resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And I think for a lot of us, this type of definition may fit the bill. How well do I adapt? How well do I adjust? How quickly does my brain shift to making change? I tell you, change is not easy. It's one of those words where you look at it and you say, these little letters can change my entire life if I don't handle it correctly or properly. You have to give yourself space and give yourself grace to sort of figure out, where do I fit on the resilience spectrum? So if you're typing in the chat, consider for a moment, if the scale was 1 to 10, where do you think you fall in the level of resilience, with 1 being at the lowest level and 10 being the highest? Having self-reflection and introspection gives you the ability to really establish, what will your baseline look like? Where am I starting from? Right out of the gate, people can easily say, I'm at a 5. I used to be at a 7. Pre-pandemic, I was probably like a 9 or a 10. I adapted. I had things moving and shaking, and I could just, make all things happen and be all things to all people. But somehow during the midst of this pandemic, our resilience was tested and it was tried. Literally, the old adage, this will test your mettle, is where this comes into play. For those of you who had children who figured out that your degree was not just for you, that you had to become the English teacher, the language arts teacher, the math teacher, the Spanish teacher, and you had to be the gym coach, you can say that you were tested at every single turn. And sometimes when our resilience is stretched, really stretched to the limit, we can say, do I have enough left in my reserve for myself? So in addition to your 1 to 10, saying where you are on the scale of resilience, where are you also now when it comes to capacity? On a scale of 1 to 10, what's your capacity number? Capacity being, I'm at a 9 and I don't have anything left for myself. I'm at a 5 and I'm giving myself room just in case something else happens. I'm at a 2. I'm emotionally stable. I'm mentally stable. I'm physically stable. I'm financially stable. I'm in a space where I have enough reserve and capacity where if something else happened through 2022, I can kind of make it because I've left something for myself. These are baselines that allow you to navigate the things in life that you do not control. And honestly, all of us can say that there are many things that challenge us in life that are beyond our control. So, what is emotional resilience? Emotional resilience is the ability to calm your frantic mind after encountering a negative experience. Think about that for a minute. Do you fly off the handle when things don't go your way? Do you overreact or overassess a situation, not recognizing that it's not as bad as you think? This is emotional resilience, because so the heart goes, so the mind goes, so the hands and feet go. Where some of us are at that space, we just want to take somebody by the neck and go, oh my God, one more time. But we get to that space where you have to test yourself and say, am I emotionally resilient? Do I have the ability to bring myself down to a level of listening, a level of understanding, and a level of engaging? Honestly, it's just that simple of turning off and on a switch. But the other side to that is the intrinsic motivation that we have, the inner force by which we can hold ourselves through the downsides of life. Now, let me tell you, It's literally like, I need to put on my emotional resilience seatbelt for what I'm going to go through next. Because sometimes we can see things coming down the pipe. If you think about from 2019, everything was going wonderful. Everything was hunky-dory. We were so excited about 2020. We were ringing in the new year. And by March, we were like, what's happening? What is actually going on? Things are not as they should be, because we really believe that 2020 was going to bring in a whole host of greatness and positivity. But, I will tell you, when I reflect on 2020, it does bring to mind what we say about hindsight. Literally, hindsight is 2020. We were caught off guard in the beginning, but all of us can say we'll probably never be caught off guard again. We have learned some things about ourselves. We have learned some things about our loved ones, about our children, about our parents, about our coworkers, just about the society in which we live, that has allowed us to say that I can hold myself during the downsides. I'm not going to move to the left. I'm not going to move to the right. I'm just going to be still and kind of see how things play out. Because a part of emotional resilience is being able to get the lay of the land and give yourself an opportunity to get your mind wrapped around what's really going on. So if you're thinking to yourself, what does emotional resilience look like for you as an individual? Can you honestly say that you are able to calm your frantic mind? Are you able to say that you've been able to hold it together? Or quite possibly, you're the individual who can hold other people together. Like the number of times that certain friends and family always reach out to you because you are the family sounding board. You are the anchor. You are the glue. You are the everything to everybody that kind of keeps the ship afloat. Oftentimes that can be overwhelming. It can lead you into that space of saying, why isn't anybody checking on me? Over the last 2 years, we've, come through this saying that you have to check on your strong friends, because oftentimes we think that our strong friends and our strong family members aren't going through the same thing that we're going through. And so it's in this space that we allow ourselves to say, call and check on your strong friends, because whereas they may be holding you and everyone else together, sometimes behind the scenes, behind the text, behind the phone call, they are actually falling apart. So this is where we allow ourselves to rise to the next level of emotional resilience and allow ourselves to be there for other people, sharing our tips, sharing some things that we have learned and discovered. So if you have some of those tips today and they're right there in the chat and you have something that you would like to say, I see that there's a question in the chat. And Esther, if we want to take a look at that now, before I move to the next section, this will give us an opportunity to really glean from one another today in this webinar space.
Absolutely. Our chat is on fire, and we do have 2 questions in the Q&A. So I'll start with the Q&A. All right. So we have a question from Ingrid Catton. How can you show a balanced optimism without being called a toxic optimist?
Ooh, I like that. How can you be called a balanced optimist without being called a toxic optimist? So let's say we'll take those at their face value, because a lot of times, let me start with this. You have to be careful who you're talking to and who you're sharing information with, because there's a tendency for that person to be projecting their own emotions onto you. So no matter how they feel, no matter the situation they're facing, no matter what you say, you're always going to be seen in the wrong shade of light, because they're not willing or have an openness to take on information that you are trying to share with them. Being balanced is about me helping you or you helping others identify where they can shave off too much that's on their plate. Some of us are still spinning 5, 6, 7, and 8 plates when this pandemic has shown us you really only need to have 2. You don't have to be everything to all people. Now, I have to say, now, toxic in some ways, it can be considered a curse word. Like, oh my God, you're so toxic. How am I being toxic if I'm trying to help you become better? If I'm wanting to show you how to improve your situation? Some people are in a space where letting go of things feels like a loss. So I would say first, know the person that you're talking to. Have a real clear identity and understanding of how they may receive, and perceive what you're going to say, but then also take a step back and say, am I the right person to deliver these messages? I'm honest to say that I may not be the right person to deliver messages for certain people, because I've been called toxic in a lot of ways. Oh, you don't want the best for me. You don't see what I'm trying to accomplish. But I do see the road that you're going down, and it's going to wear you out sooner than you want to, and you're going to regret how you're moving about your life. So I hope that I've answered your question to your satisfaction. However, those of you who are in the chat, if you would also like to lend your expertise and voice, please feel free to do so that we can learn from one another.
Yes, we have a couple of things going on in the chat. The Q&A is starting to light up as well. Let me pluck something from the chat so we can see what people are saying. Let's see, Clavis, I can't see the full last name at the moment. People see you as they are not necessary, or you are. Optimism comes from seeing the positive in a situation, nothing toxic about that. Let's see. And Kathy is saying some may be projecting, but it may also be that people are presenting their positivity in such a way that it doesn't hold space for their emotions and experiences.
That's pretty heavy. Yeah, holding space for your own emotions and experiences can oftentimes be a little bit difficult. I did open the chat, and I'm just going to run through these really quickly. How can I support others who need to develop skills for resilience where they are deeply pessimistic or have mental health illness? I will say that is one of the challenges. You first have to get the person healthy enough to be able to receive what you need to say to them. And oftentimes it means going to a coach, taking some pastoral care opportunities, or going to see an actual psychologist or psychiatrist. Depressed people who are consistently pessimistic will not see the rabbit hole that they're in. There's no light at the end of the tunnel, and it can oftentimes need assistance beyond just this webinar. So help that person be open. One of the other questions, I oftentimes am emotionally flustered, and I started to identify is that, how can I change the narrative? Well, a couple of things with changing your own narrative is that I thank you, first of all, for being able to self-identify. I think that being in denial is one of the worst places that a person can be. And the sooner that you can self-identify that you need to change your own narrative. And sometimes it begins with changing your location, your perspective or vantage point, in a sense that, do you stay in the house too often? Or are you around too many people? What does that actually look like for you? So giving yourself the ability, what narrative, first of all, do you want to create? And by acknowledging that there can be a new narrative and writing it down, then you'll have a tendency to gravitate toward being able to have experiences and exposure that allow you to be able to move into that new narrative. So living out the narrative after having identified what you want that narrative to be often leads to corrective action and positive change. How would you evaluate your level of resilience and capacity when you get to a place where you do not feel that emotion, either positive or negative, regardless of the stress of life? Wow. We can all say amen to that, because that's that space of complacency. I have been, and a lot of us have been, desensitized, if you will, to just the happenings around us. Like, I've had it up to here. And sometimes you have to do your list, which is what I do. What's in this column and what's in that column, divide it up however you want, and say what was out of my control. And I remove things that I never had control over. That means I recognize going forward, I'm not going to allow myself to get in that situation again where I'm not either the decision maker or around or have relationships with the decision maker. I make other columns for myself in that space of saying, how did this make me feel? And when did I pinpoint that feeling? I don't want to feel that anymore. I don't want to be numb to life. And if I'm around people that make me feel numb, if I'm engaged in activities that make me feel numb, I'm removing myself from that situation. And then the other person who asked the question related to the capacity number being higher or lower. You want to have a low number in your capacity, because that means you still have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to grow, to give yourself room for things that are out of your control, the unexpected things in life. And so that provides you with that opportunity to be able to thrive and survive, whatever it is that may come along the way, because you've given yourself reserve. If you already know you're at an 8, you have to really carefully monitor and say, can I add value to this thing? How much of me is it going to take to be in relationship, in partnership, engaged in this project activity, or whatever the case may be? And then if you have personal things that could come up down the road and you're already at a 10, you have nothing left for self. And a lot of emotional resilience and balanced living is, how well am I taking care of me? Because you can't give to others from an empty cup. So let's talk about this for a moment. The impact of the downsides of life can lead to emotional exhaustion. Do you know and follow the signs? So some of the signs related to a lack of emotional resilience and balance are the emotional symptoms: anxiety, apathy, depression, feeling hopeless, feeling powerless or trapped, irritability, nervousness, fearfulness, lack of motivation. Understanding the signs and then attaching the activity, the person, the relationship, the job, the everything that put you in this emotional state is a time to say, let me do some self-care. Am I overly invested in these people, places, and things? Do I need to pull myself out of that environment? One of the keys to emotional resilience is also recognizing when certain things in life have become a crutch and that they're doing harm to you more than they're doing good for you. So these are the signs of emotional symptoms related to emotional resilience. The second set of signs are physical: fatigue, headache, lack of appetite, sore muscles and muscle tension. I'll give you a great example. I had a job that I actually loved doing. I related to it so well that I was overly invested in it and the people that I were helping. And then one day I started having fatigue and headache and a loss of appetite. I was not feeling as if I could be in that space because a lot of what other people were bringing, they were consumers of what I was offering, but they weren't willing to activate the power within themselves to also be engaged in the process. Simply put, you cannot want more for others than they want for themselves. You cannot want more for others than they want for themselves. And when you're in that space that people are just taking, and you don't have an outlet for yourself to be refilled and be refueled, you will find yourself exhibiting physical symptoms of emotional imbalance. And this can also lead into the danger zone of health issues related to chronic fatigue, chronic depression, chronic stress. Chronic states require a physician and medication. And so the level that we're talking at today is self-identification, being able to say, I need to step back, I need to pull away, I need to walk the block, I need to run around the corner, I need to do a whole host of other things to kind of free myself up. And then I need to reevaluate my role and position in the spaces that I occupy so that I am not feeling these things again. So signs 1, sign 2, this brings us now to performance symptoms. Now, these performance symptoms begin to impact us in a way where it affects your bottom line if you are an entrepreneur. It affects your relationship with your kids, your engagement and intimacy with your significant other or your spouse. These are types of things that fall into the lines of, I can't meet deadlines because I'm already exhausted and tired from signs 1 and 2, and I didn't pull myself back. Your work ethic and your commitment is waning simply because you're tired all the time and you just don't have that capacity, to deal with taking on a new project. Or even if you want to go for a promotion, I don't want to fill out the application. I don't want to sit through another interview. I don't want to put together a video clip. You just don't want to. And so when you get to the don't want us, it's time to say, I may be doing too much. I may have too many people in my life. You're experiencing more absences, not just absences from work, absences from family engagements, absences from brunches and lunches and, playing golf and shooting hoops with the boys. Whatever it is that you do, you're frequently absent more often than usual, people will get concerned and like, hey, you okay? What's going on? This is why I say check on your strong friends, because your strong friends will show you something's wrong when they start to become absent from the familiar places where you engage with them. And then performing work duties more slowly. Like, oh, I think I put 3 things on my calendar today because I just want to go to work and have a cup of coffee. Yeah, I think it's time for lunch. Do I have the latitude to take longer at lunch? And I may decide to open up this project file and see what is the lowest thing on the totem pole where I can show excellence, because I really don't want to take on 2 or 3 more tasks. Your entire process of thinking changes when your emotional resilience is low. And this says to me that you have to literally be okay with giving yourself self-love, self-care, and self-reflection. Because as sooner you're able to self-identify where you're falling short on things that you used to love to do, is the time to do a check-in with yourself and do a staycation somewhere. Turn your phone off. I mean, I love my Apple Watch. It now knows when I don't want to be bothered. It literally turns itself on to focus mode for do not disturb. And I actually like when I get the report that says my screen time is down, because it lets me know that I'm doing something right, that I'm not on social media, I'm not talking on the phone, I'm not engaging at levels where I need to rest, take a 30-minute nap, go sit on the porch, walk around the corner, whatever the case may be. I am discovering, and the pandemic taught me that it's okay to say no, because it is also a complete sentence. So before we get to this particular slide, any other questions or comments, Esther, that you may have seen that we'd like to highlight? You're on mute, Esther.
My apologies.
No worries.
We have a question here. How can I learn effective ways of navigating a new environment job where accountability is not practiced on a management level?
Welcome to leadership, because self-leadership is literally where your question begins and ends. Despite the culture of your environment, you have to bring your own excellence to the table, and hopefully you can switch the culture around you. It is difficult when there's no standards. You have to decide, do I fall into the culture of the company? And if I fall into the culture of the environment, does it change how I behave? Will I be seen as a person who is just like everybody else? And perhaps you were brought in to where you are in this new environment because you are supposed to shift the culture. You will bring a level of excellence and work ethic and accountability to the environment. And you also have to feel comfortable with saying, let me give myself a checklist. Did I come in on time? Did I talk to upper management? Am I meeting my goals? This work has to get done whether anybody approves it or not. It is difficult to be in an environment where people are sort of lax, but I will say give the company and the people grace, because if you've been away from the office, people are kind of slowly stepping into what does the new normal of efficiency and excellence look like in the workplace. And maybe that's a start for a new conversation in your environment. How do we talk about where we're going now, and what are some of our benchmarks for excellence and productivity, so that everyone's not thinking that I'm just going to bring my home work life back into my business work life. And if you happen to be working from home, what are some of the expectations that are for you, regardless of the other people? And unfortunately, you probably have the displeasure of working in a team and in an environment where collaboration has to happen. And so exercising good judgment in who you're talking to, so that way you're spreading joy around the office versus them saying, oh, here comes this new person and they have expectations. Let's see how quickly we can squash that. So you definitely need to build allies and get buy-in so that you can have a balanced work day and have balance in your work activity.
I'm seeing a comment and I'm seeing a question that kind of lines up with it so perfectly.
Okay.
There's someone who is saying, how do you say no without being mean or selfish or having to defend why you're saying no? And then there's a comment that says, no is a complete sentence.
Yes, no is a complete sentence. And so we'll start with the apology part. It all begins on how you say no. Hey, I understand that there's an issue we need to address, or I see that you've requisitioned for me to come and be a part of A, B, C, D, et cetera, et cetera. Let me just say there's not enough capacity at the moment for me to take on a new assignment, so I'm going to have to decline. Oftentimes, given the explanation up front is the no. And it allows you to say that no with confidence and that person respecting it. Then it brings you into if the person doesn't accept or respect the no. It matters how you deliver the information. And sometimes it may take someone else to deliver it for you, like management. If this question is related to work, you're often talking to management saying, hey, I see that we're going down this direction. Here's what's already on my plate. You have to decide, do you really want to do what you're being asked? If you don't want to do what you're being asked, then no is no. You share that with management and you let it go. If you want to do it, then you have to get permission, because you're then saying, okay, something needs to come off my plate. You guys can't be pulling me in all these different directions all the time. And so that's when you get buy-in. You get someone else to say, hey, I saw you wanted so-and-so, and we're not going to be able to pull that off unless you want to bring the project down the road. In real life and in relationships, you're always going to be mean. Let me just say that. If you've been the person who's always been the yes, if you've always been the go-to, if you've always been the individual that people can come to in relationships, when you have to say no, it's, I need you to respect my no, because I'm in a space where no has to exist. And that's how I end it. I literally started and ended that way. I love you guys, but I'm in that space right now where everything is a no until further notice. It takes people aback a little bit, but I also know where I'm at on my capacity meter. And I always need room for me, because the level in which I operate and function, I can be at a 5 and room for more. But when called upon for certain things, it can use up that capacity really quickly. And so you have to know by profession, is this a 1 capacity notch? Is this request a 2 or 3 capacity notch? Is it all the way up to I'm at my reserve and now I need to start readjusting my schedule or figuring out other people to do some things, because this is going to take me to my limit and I still need to be able to come back down and recover myself. So self-love and self-care is so important, but let your no be no. If you ever think for a moment your no might be a maybe, it's always, let me get back to you, and just leave it there. I'll need to get back to you on that. And in the meantime, hopefully they figure it out on their own, or they go and ask somebody else. And so that way, you know, you were really needed, or you were just a person of convenience. So hopefully that was helpful. And hopefully these next few slides will help answer some of these questions, because turning that emotional corner of exhaustion, it can be really difficult. Let me see if I can expand this slide just a little, because it's a tiny bit tiny. It doesn't look like it's going to get bigger. But with that in mind, so there's different sides to the well-being side of emotional resilience. And if you can see on the slide, involved and detached. So you have where you're healthy on the top lines, and then where you're moving into that unhealthy space on the bottom. So if you're involved, you're empathetic, you're confident, you know, with others, you're being cooperative. But if you become detached, then you're sort of aloof and narcissistic. You're somewhat disagreeable, uncomfortable with others, you're irritable. This is the space of some of what we've been talking about related to your questions. You have to make certain that in your emotional resilience, well-being, that you have that ability to say, this is where I need to stay. I need to identify what causes me to remove myself from that. And then when I'm down here, I need to be able to see how to go back up. So with emotional resilience, you're emotionally stable, you're calm, you're engaged, you're grounded, you're not flying off the handle, you're not yelling at your kids, you're not yelling at people in the office, you're not slamming your coffee cup on the desk, you know, you're not throwing coffee on the wall. We all have different ways in which we show when we're fed up. But sometimes when you're when you're in that emotional reactivity space, you're neurotic, you're volatile, you're anxious, you're withdrawn, you have unrealistic, your thoughts are not where they need to be. It's like everybody's out to get me. No, not everyone. And these are some things, the words that we say that we talk about in NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. Things in life aren't most times ever, all, and everyone. If you're saying all people, everyone, then you're in that space of being unrealistic, because not all people and not everyone is out to get you or anything else. Now, most people, some people, a few people. So learning how to change your language will also move your meter up to emotional resilience, that I can take a very good outlook at what it is I need to do and determine if I am projecting myself onto a situation or circumstance. And then the other side is being self-control. You're conscientious, you're orderly, you're restrained, you're industrious. You have all the qualities and things that you need in place. You begin to identify and recognize when people are trying to push your buttons. You recognize when you're triggered. For those of you who have an Apple Watch, there are two things that happen. One, it will tell you to breathe, and other times it will tell you to have a moment of mindfulness. When I see that pop up on my watch, I always ask myself, what just happened? Maybe something triggered me, conversation, a dialogue, a coaching session that maybe I wasn't aware of. I'll look at my watch an hour from now and I'll say, what happened, 2 hours ago? Why did it tell me that? And I go back and I'll reassess my day, because I don't want to get into that space of being permissive, antisocial, and unrestrained, because then I get disorderly. I have to tell you, I am a person who has recovered from anger management. And I'm honest about that, because it allows me to see where I was off balance, because I wasn't addressing personal and professional things that annoyed me, because I felt like I had to do everything right in order to be able to advance in my career, in order to be able to be seen in the proper light for, promotion, et cetera, et cetera. And then I recognized that, one, I don't have to be all things to all people. I need to be true to myself. The second thing I recognized was maybe I was pursuing goals that were beyond my makeup, beyond my capacity, that I can thrive in other areas without having to conform to what other people had an image of me being. And I have to tell you that I am in a happier place, a better place. I am 57 years old. I learned this when I was 37. Because from 20s to 30s, there's a certain thing that people seem to think you're supposed to be, ought to be, need to be, when in reality is I just want to be my best me. So it took me a decade to get to that space of saying I need to really level the playing field of expectations for myself and do what I'm good at doing and allow myself to thrive there. So I don't take assignments, projects, or work where I have to try to measure up to somebody else's standards of excellence. I think my own standards of excellence are pretty high, and I'm comfortable being in that space. For the very last thing that's on the screen, you become susceptible to psychological distress. And that is so key. Once you're at that space of being susceptible to psychological distress, you fall in that space of being easily manipulated by other people. They've watched you enough. They know you well enough to just suggest a certain thing. I think it'd be great if we all went out today, to lunch. Susie can pay. Susie's like, what? I didn't sign up to pay for lunch just because everybody wants to go out. And you have to be strong enough to say, no, we can go out to lunch, but it's Dutch. Everybody's going to pay for their own, or everybody's going to start creating a pool where we can pay for lunch. And sometimes it's just the little things that can move you into always being the scapegoat, always being the fallback person, always being the individual who doesn't mind something at 4:45 being put on your desk that's due at 5 o'clock. I am clear in my role as a manager and a leader that poor performance on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. And the sooner that we begin to identify, understand, and delegate to people work that needs to get done, whether it's in your family, teaching your kids how to make a square. If they can make a square at school with construction paper, your kids are old enough to know how to fold their own laundry. I'm just saying, give yourself the ability to pull yourself out of things that are no longer your responsibility, where you can ease and guide other people to taking on different levels of responsibility in your life. Questions, comments, Esther?
A lot of people are praising the last comment you made about folding that sheet of paper and folding clothes. They said it's the truth, and then preach on that one.
Yeah, it definitely does work. I mean, you have to be able, okay, so I'm also a recovering control freak. Something else I learned between 37 and 40. And it is that if I am the only person that can do a thing, then I'm not doing my job as a leader and training other people to take over. You have to have some levels of succession planning in every duty that you do. At what point can you train a junior assistant or a student teacher or a family member or someone else in the scope of your life to start taking on new responsibility? A good leader motivates, inspires, and trains and prepares other people to take the baton when it's time to be passed. And so you can look at your life, look at everything and say, the kids are tall enough to reach the microwave now. How about I put a step stool there and tell them how a microwave works? Just push 30 seconds 3 times and it'll be a minute and 30 seconds and your item will be ready, and then be there to supervise. So it's one of those things where you say you start with yourself with baby steps, and then you allow other people to engage at different levels. And that will help you release the reins of control so that you're not the only person that has to do it. I will tell you, you may not like other people's methodology. You may not like their approach. But the real question is, if you've done a good job leading and managing, then they will definitely give you the end result. So I usually start with, this is what I need to see at the end. How you get there is all going to be learning curve for everybody. And so I'm okay with that. And it gives me space to grow and, excel and look at other things that I would like to see in my life happen. Anything else? I'm going to move to the next slide. So just know that you are not alone in anything that you face.
Okay. Do you want me to ask one more?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just saying that we are not alone. And then I'm going to move to this slide.
Okay. There's a question that just popped up. How do you remain grounded in your truth of who you are when others doubt your sincerity? People seem annoyed and upset by the way I handle things in a positive light, even when I do my best to live out that perspective.
Oh, so let me start with this phrase. And the phrase that I often say is, when people have been benefiting from your blindness, they were in their best space. When people have been benefiting from your blindness, they have been in the best space. However, it was not the best space for you. What that means is this: people are consistently, and I say people, and a whole bunch of folks just flash through your mind just in that instant, of people who are quite comfortable with always delegating to you, dumping on you, you being the person in the office who flies off the handle, because then they don't have to do any of the heavy lifting. But the moment that you identify and recognize that there is more to you than what people have seen in you, that you want to go to the next level and raise the bar in your life, then people get kind of offended, because now it's like, well, who am I going to call on? Who can I pick on? Who can I dump this work on? You're no longer that individual. So they've been benefiting from your blindness from when you could not see that there was more that you could add value to in the environment in which you have yourself. And so that's always a very difficult space. So be cautious again about projecting. Other people will project their displeasure on you with your new attitude, because they can no longer manipulate you to do, be, and say the things that benefited them. Now, I may be projecting at this moment because I don't know all of the situation, but it does warrant awareness. What were people gaining before you became who you are now? And just the fact that you have the audacity to raise your station and level the playing field and raise the stakes in your own life, it's kind of put some people on notice, if you will, that I'm challenging where we are because I want to be better. And so that is a word of caution, that sometimes you have to change your environment in order to feel comfortable with the new you that you have found. I would hope that most of us after the pandemic, in this pandemic and going back to office, that you're not who you were when you left. Of course, your work ethic should be raised and all of those things, but just how you view people and how they were operating in your space, that should have changed to some degree. Because if you can see you differently than the people who've been around you, you should be able to see them differently as well. And that could be positive or negative. Okay. So know that you are not alone. And these polls are, come from very reputable resources. But in that, 83% of Americans polled thought that they had high levels of mental and emotional resilience, when in fact only 57% scored as resilient after taking an assessment to measure their personal resilience, which is why I asked you those questions. And at the bottom, I'll make this presentation available, for those of you who will want it. Esther will, get it out. I believe they have a copy, but that survey is there. The survey is there for you to determine how resilient are you. 91% of the most resilient Americans believe mental health is as important as physical health, and I'm right up there with them. But only 33% of Americans are likely to ask for help or counseling when faced with a negative situation that is emotionally taxing. A lot of times, getting over what we go through will require assistance. We're strong. We can get through some things, but we can't get through everything. And if it's your goal to be able to discover how to tackle the things that you're facing, seeking wise counsel, seeking psychological help, seeing someone about giving you a roadmap and the tools that you need will guide that decision. And less resilient people have a passive type attitude. It is what it is. I recognize that I say that from time to time, and I had to, kind of pull myself back from using that phrase, because I didn't want to always be in the mindset of just letting things slide. When you let things slide and they start to pile up, you'll look back and say, how did this get to be so disastrous? It was for all the times that you said, it is what it is. I don't want to deal with that right now. Let me put that on the back burner. I'll get back to it. The reality is, our days are short. and sometimes you just can't get back to things because everything is screaming, everything is urgent. So if you can handle it now, which is why resilience and capacity is important. If you can handle it, be honest about it and say, I need to table that thing till another time. I can't get to this right now. I'm going to need 6 months, a year. And if it needs some attention, then maybe they need to seek someone else and maybe you can help them find that. But it is those things of saying that I don't want to spend my time overanalyzing, overthinking, and shying away from things that may be for me right now, or may be for me later, or may not be for me ever. And I'm okay with saying that's not for me. I'll take a pass. And then I leave that conversation knowing I made the best decision for my personal well-being and mental health. And I just have to, feel good that the other person will respect that my mental health is important to me. And so 63% of the people don't sweat the small stuff, when the reality is, it's one of those things. Don't sweat the small stuff versus overthinking things. Equally, those things can just kind of get you off center. So as you can see, with resilience in the middle of our graphic, there are 4 areas where you need to consider. Connectedness to community. Who's your tribe? Who's your village? Who are your go-to people? The people that you want to do road trips with, the people you want to, go to Starbucks with, individuals you don't mind, having a frosted coffee with at Chick-fil-A. Who is in your community? Who's in your corner? Who's supporting you? Not your yes people. Now, your amen corner and your yes people are not the same people, because some people tell you yes just to get you out of their way. Other people will tell you yes just because they don't want to deal with what you're facing, and they'll let you go down that rabbit hole, and they'll be like, oh, well. So you have to be careful with your community connectedness. And then there's risk and vulnerability. How much risk are you willing to take to become healthy and stay healthy? And are you okay with being vulnerable and transparent? I am, as you can tell, I'm perfectly comfortable with taking risks, being vulnerable, and being transparent, because it's how I've come to discover the best part of me. I'm what's called a CRT. I am a calculated risk taker. A calculated risk taker. I need to weigh every decision to some degree to make certain that I don't overanalyze it later. I don't want to rethink it later. I don't want to have, I don't want to second guess myself and have doubts. So the better able you are to sit down and do a literal balance sheet for yourself. What makes you balance? What gets you off center? What kind of pushes your buttons in the wrong way? And then what really makes you shine and feel joy in your heart? These are the things you have to ask yourself. So there's work that has to go into being balanced and being resilient. Planning and procedures. Now, this comes from personal or perspective. Planning and procedures. We all need a guideline from which to work from. And if you're in an office environment or a workspace or in school to where everything's just kind of free for all, that could kind of, rub you the wrong way. It can actually get on your nerves if you are a person who needs order, who needs structure, who needs a planner, who needs a calendar. You have to know what you can take and then know where I can add value or where you can add value. And then also where you're saying, you know what, this situation is just going to really be chaotic. And you ask yourself, can I take chaos for a month, 3 months, 6 months? Can I take it for a week or 30 minutes? I mean, there's some meetings I don't go to if they're longer than an hour, because after about 30 minutes, I can't take it anymore. And so I am honest with myself about that. I'm like, tell me when I need to come in. That's when I'll show up, because all the rest of that and everything that goes along with the people that it comes with, it's just too much. So I need planning and procedures. And then also available resources. You need people resources, financial resources. You need paper resources, like what's written, where's the manual, who do I talk to, who do I go see, what are they saying, going to webinars, going to workshops, networking events. All of these give you available resources. If you are the resource person, you still need resources for yourself, because as I said before, you have to make certain that your cup is in that space where it can be filled as quickly as you empty it, because you need to make certain that you have enough fuel for yourself. All right, Esther, I'm winding down to where we are and how to build your emotional resilience, and then whatever questions we have left. So as you can see, there are a couple of steps that you can take to build your resilience, build connections with other people, prioritize those relationships, and reach out to others by joining community-based groups in your area. Manage your thoughts, work on maintaining a hopeful outlook, and accept that change and setbacks are really just a part of life, and there's not much that you can do about those. But how you react to them and respond to them is something that you can control. The important thing is to keep working toward your goals. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Please take care of yourself. Foster wellness by taking care of your mind and your body. Eat well, stay physically active, and avoid unhealthy coping mechanisms. I will tell you that escapism and avoidance are on the spectrum of unhealthy coping mechanisms. Now, with that in mind, discovering what unhealthy means to you is a personal thing, and being able to recognize that. I recognize that when I get just a tad bit stressed, I go to find something to eat. During this pandemic, I learned that Swiss cake rolls and Little Debbie were not the healthy of choices. So I've resorted to eating apples with tahini. So it gives me a little bit of sweet and a little bit of savory. But I had to recognize that for myself, be honest with myself, that I had kind of turned that corner of being inside, that eating was my go-to, while binge watching shows that I kind of missed when I was heavily working. The other thing is fortify your relationship and your faith with friends and family, whatever that looks like for you. Clarify those important tenets that allow you to have great relationships and people that you can rely on. And this is in all 4 seasons: spring, summer, winter, fall, the seasons of life, middle age, old age, young age, seasons of work, high productivity, low productivity, midterm productivity. In every season of your life, have those important people in your space, friends, family, your faith, that allows you to have some direction and guidance. So that way, sooner than later when you're kind of off center and out of balance. And then there's some resources at www.verywellmind that have been utilized to put together this slide. And I can say from personal experience, you may have to tweak them according to what works for you, but on par, the subheadings for certain are working. And then how you walk them out is an individual choice or decision. And I think, the last few. Ridding yourself of the residue takes time: emotional, physical, and performance, which we talked about those earlier. Make certain that you're in that space to be able to get balance, and these E's are here for you. Practice elimination. Eliminate influences that bring you down. Consider eating, eat balanced or according to the physician's plan. Engage in exercise. Do it regularly and consistently because a little bit goes a long way. And then close your eyes. Close your eyes to sleep and practice mindfulness. All of these things will allow you, with the questions that we've had, the comments that have been posted, to give you that ability to say, it is possible to consider balance. And then from there, you can begin to work on living a more resilient and balanced life toward greater mental health. The end, Esther.
Awesome. Awesome. We have a lot of people in the chat singing your praises. They enjoyed the information you've added and given them today. I know there was a lot of questions. We probably didn't get a chance to answer everything. But just for the sake of time, I'm going to ask the last two questions. One of the questions I have here is, I feel as if I'm expected to be resilient. That expectation feels overwhelming. Sometimes I just want to be in an it is what it is mindset.
That's a great place to start, as long as it's not your ongoing answer for everything. And it's so funny because that was the first question that I saw. Do we have the ability to capture the questions, to save them or something? If not, I will stay on if this can stay open and I can answer them individually.
I know we can capture the chat, but I don't think so much with the questions.
Okay, so let me answer Zoanne's question. I'm going to begin with it is what it is mindset. Sometimes it's the best place to start, because what you know is that at the onset, I'm overwhelmed, and beginning to unravel being overwhelmed is the acknowledgement that I am overwhelmed. But I don't think you want to stay in the is what it is, I'm overwhelmed phase. And so with that in mind, you begin to say, how did I get overwhelmed? What got me to this point? Is it familiar people? Is it places? Is it things? Is it the way of the world and society? Then you allow yourself to do what I call picking the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit is, of the things that I just listed, what do I control and where can I take ownership? Ownership is probably the hardest part of being resilient. It's because what role did I play to get me to this place? So you have to really look at yourself in the mirror and say, can I take ownership of my actions, my behavior, my attitude? I can't take my words back, but am I in a space where I can go back and say, could I do this differently? And sometimes it's just admitting to yourself that I can do all of these things differently. And then all of a sudden I'm not as overwhelmed because I don't have to have closure to everything, at least not in front of other people. I just need to bring closure to myself with the things that I have done. And so finding closure will lessen the amount of the overwhelming feeling. So if your overwhelming meter is at 100% and you want to bring it down to 90, it's what could I control? And then what I couldn't control in 2 columns. And then in my what can I control? And I don't want to go back to that again. What am I dismissing out of my life, never to occur again? Sometimes you have to just take things off the page, like all that's over, it's done, and it is what it was, but never to happen again. And so you start there. But then the other column, what are the things that I do control? And how much did it take out of me to try to control and manage it? One thing that I discovered when I get overwhelmed and trying to be in that space of resilience is that I want to be able to bounce back. I want my rubber band to snap immediately back. But I realized that there's tension on that rubber band and sometimes it gets overly stretched. And so maybe it was a tight rubber band and over time, it's kind of like when I snap, it only stops here. Or, a longer rubber band will allow you to snap and it'll just fall down. So you have to kind of discover, what is your elasticity when it relates to things as it relates to resilience? Because there are times when you need to say, maybe I need to expand my whole realm about things so I'm not overwhelmed in general. Oftentimes we may be operating in a small pond. And being resilient is impossible because everything is always right on top of you all the time. But the more you grow and expand your horizon and perspective about where you can function, then you widen the circle and the pool. And so being overwhelmed isn't as much, nor is it as costly mentally, physically, and emotionally, because you are now in a greater capacity to manage. And you also have resources around you that come and lend aid when you're like, I'm out. And so knowing when to stop out, I would say, is the final thing. So resilience is something you have to desire. But I will also say that resilience is something that's in all of us. It's how we activate it, prioritize it and utilize it, that gives us the ability to kind of stay out of the fray of life, if you will. So hopefully that feeling like you want to at least tackle resilience. I think that it's perfectly fine to be in that space of, I just don't care. And then allow yourself to slowly move out of it as you feel comfortable in the many steps and layers that it takes. It didn't take, a short period of time to get there, and it's not going to take a short period of time to get out of it. So give yourself grace to discover how you want to heal, when you want to heal, and where you want to heal, and then be able to tackle those areas in your comfort zone.
Awesome. Dr. Hood Martin, before I bring this to a close, I'd like for you to just tell us where we can find more of you, because this hour may not have been enough. They're wanting to know where we can learn more about what the topics that you're sharing. Where can we find out more about what you have?
Sure. So my website is there. There's information on my website about what I do in the space of balanced living and coaching certifications and preparation and training people from leadership to resilience to everything in between that affects us as individuals and how we interact with the people around us in the world. I was telling Esther earlier that in February, I actually launched a television show on Black Star Network. My husband and I own a network, and you can find it on any types of streaming. But my show is called A Balanced Life. I have a book called Fulfill the Art and Joy of Balanced Living, and I have a devotional for couples on Wedded Bliss, how to live a balanced life in relationship with your mate. The purpose of the show is to talk about these very things, everyday life. Someone asked the question, what happens when people can't be trained? There are many people in life who have a bad understanding and just cannot be trained. It's not in them to be anything other than they are. And I allow those people to be in that space where I am not, because it is taxing emotionally, physically, and all the other Ali's in your life, to deal with people who just aren't ready to come around. And so you have to be okay with leaving people behind. And so you can find me Tuesday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern on Black Star Network, talking about a balanced life and the different things that we face in everyday living. And then outside of that, I'm always available. I'll say, as I said before, someone can type my email in the chat. It's Jackie, JACQUIE, at Jackie, JACQUIEHOOD.com, Jackie at JackieHood.com. And you can email me there. Please put in the subject line, emotional resilience. That way I will know where we connected, and it will give me an opportunity to engage with some of the questions I did not have an opportunity to answer, but also be able to, if there's anything I can do to send you in the direction that you may be seeking. Thank you, Esther, and the Center for Teaching and Learning for this opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You fed us today. Within an hour, you gave us a meal's worth of information. We'd like to thank you, Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, for taking the time to present. And thank you to all the attendees for joining and participating in this interactive experience. As a reminder, the recording will be posted in the CTL LibGuides within the next 24 hours. So be on the lookout for that. Have a good one.
Thank you.